Hey everybody, Matt and I are here today to talk all about the latest edition of SaberSim, and that's our entry editor with late swap. This is something that we have put a ton of work into over the last almost year, really. And we're really excited to release this and to show you how much power there is in this. And so what you're going to see with this tool is just how easy it is to manage your entries and also to late swap, to react to late breaking news. You're gonna be able to do all of this in seconds without fighting with clunky spreadsheets, without worrying if you are making any mistakes. It's gonna lock you out, anything at all. We've got you covered with this brand new tool. And what Matt's gonna do is just kind of show you from start to finish how he is using this tool to build his lineups for an actual slate. And Matt, you're going to use Draftkings for this, but the process is really similar for FanDuel. And in our help docs, we actually do have some guides that show where the differences are between the sites. But yeah, Matt, you want to just kick things off and show kind of the first part of the process?
Yeah, so what I normally do is I'll start actually not in SaberSim, but I'll start just reserving my entries in DraftKings. So the easiest way to do this is to actually bulk enter a dummy lineup just to begin with. So what I'll do is I'm just going to enter some dummy lineup here. It doesn't really matter when I enter here because I'm going to immediately edit it, but I'll make sure there's not out players. Enter it here, and then the easiest way to multi-enter in DraftKings is you enter your one lineup, and then you click this bulk enter button, and this lets you enter, up to I think 300 entries at a time. So, generally the best strategy is to max out all of the really low dollar contests and the single entries first before doing too much in the really big GPPs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to filter. I'll start at 30 and below, but I'm going to, play, I'll probably put, 50 in this one, but then I'll, enter the 20 entry max here. I'm going to filter for tournaments because I don't really want to play cash. And, I'll enter the single entries. I'll then go into the and one and enter that. I won't necessarily enter every single one, but onto the mini max. So mini max is a really great contest if you want to experiment with 150 max contest, but you don't want to spend a ton of money. This is a great way. It's $75 to enter 150 lineups. I'll do the single entry, and then
I'll 20 in the quarter jukebox.
Yeah, there we go. And I'll just stick with that. So I'll enter these. So you just hit submit. And once that's done, it takes a while with DraftKings to enter all of them. So actually, while that's running, I'll go over back to SaberSim, and I'm just going to run my default kind of initial build. So generally, the way that I like to do it is I'll enter that dummy lineup just because that's the easiest way to bulk enter in DraftKings. But players lose so much money by missing out on editing their entries. So say, there's power outages all across the country right now, right? So if your power goes out and suddenly you can't edit your lineups before lock and you're stuck with this dummy lineup in, hundreds of dollars worth of entries, you're kind of screwed. So,
or even if you just make a mistake when editing Excel or whatever you're used to dealing with, like there's just a lot that can go wrong. And frankly, a lot of players would just leave those dummies in right up until their real build at lock, because it was kind of a pain in the ass to actually get their lineups into Excel, into DraftKings, and whatever else. And that has cost tons of players tons of money. With the entry editor, Matt's going to show you in just a second just how easy it is to swap that out so that you'll have no excuse for leaving a dummy in for more than 5 minutes.
Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick build. So I already made some adjustments to projections earlier. These are just really quick initial adjustments. So one thing I did is I lowered a bit of the early game because I really want to take advantage of late swap later in the slate. So I want to make sure that, if there's major changes, if LeBron gets ruled out later, I want to make sure that I have a lot of spots to swap. So I lowered some of the early game players. I actually increased LeBron. Normally people might decrease a player that's questionable because they're afraid of the risk. But with late swap, I'm not afraid of that. I know I can swap him out. So I'm going to increase LeBron, increase Kyrie, and really, hopefully get some edge with the late swap later on. So I made those adjustments. I'm just going to run a default build. I'm not really going to change anything because this isn't my final build. This is just my, first initial build just to get, viable lineups in my entries. So I'll run that build. Once this finishes, I'm going to show you just how quick and easy it is to edit my existing entries. So, you can see it runs pretty fast. It's just finishing up. I'm not going to make any changes here. I'm just going to enter this as is because, again, this is not my final.
We're trying to just get rid of that dummy lineup, and we want to put our own thoughts into this because, again, if things do go wrong, we don't want to just put random lineups in there, but we're not trying to do a ton of quality control. We're just trying to make sure we don't have too much exposure to a bad lineup in there.
Yeah, so my lineups are already saved. The default, first 150 are saved here. So I'm just going to go to the entry editor and upload these lineups into Draftkings. So I go to the entry editor and we haven't uploaded the entries yet, but it's really easy, especially with Draftkings. All I have to do is click this link to download my template file. It goes into my downloads bar and I can just drag it right over here and upload it.
The only thing to keep in mind is for that to work, you do just have to be already logged into Draftkings. But if you just enter your contest, you should be. But that's just one thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and for FanDuel, it's just a couple extra clicks. So it'll just take you to the upcoming slate and you download the entries file that way. We do have a video that shows how that works, but you can see this is my dummy lineup that I've got in these 263 entries. So all I have to do to edit these entries is I'll go to fill contest with lineups. We've got this selected right here. This is the build that I just did. I'm just going to, so really quickly, there are a few different ways to fill in my lineups. Rank will just fill, the top, however big the contest is, it'll just fill that contest with the top, 150, top 20, top 1 lineup from my lineup set. If I do unique, it'll just fill them in randomly from my lineup set so that they're evenly distributed across all of my entries. In this case, it doesn't really matter what I do because this is just sort of my placeholder build. So I'll just fill by rank. We can see that it fills in my lineups right here. This is my lineup set. And I'm just going to hit download entries, and I'll just hit download and open Draftkings. And this will open me right up to the page where I can upload my new entries file. You can see it downloaded the file right here. So I'm just going to upload the entries file, and boom, that's uploaded. If I go to lineups, then I can see that I've got, once the Draftkings loads, I've got all of my entries right here. So now if something happens between now and lock and I can't edit my entries, my power goes out, or there's some error where I'm unable to run another build, at least I know that I have viable entries. It's not going to be a complete loss. I have viable entries. Plus, because of late swap, even if I miss lock, I can go and swap out. If LeBron gets ruled out and I can't get to my computer until later tonight, I can still run that late swap. The only players that are locked are in that early game. So this is really a great way to just save that yourself from that horrible situation where you have a dummy lineup in place and you can't fix it. You can't edit it.
This is just like very good insurance. It may seem like, oh, nothing, I'll be fine, I can deal with it later. But like when it truly takes a couple minutes to do, there's no excuse to leave that dummy in for longer than a few minutes. So we always recommend to anyone doing mass multi-entry to get rid of their dummy and get in some real lineups there. And then once the starters are confirmed for the first game, Matt's going to just put a bit more effort into the build to get this updated. And if he was playing cash, which tonight on just a smaller slate, he's not going to be. But if he was playing cash, he could even do separate builds for GPPs and cash and make sure those get assigned to the right contests, all just right from within this entry editor in just a few clicks. But yeah, he's not going to go through the full build process in this video because we really just wanted to focus on the entry editor with late swap in this video. But if you do want a deeper dive into building strong NBA lineups, check out our video, The 6 Secrets to Beating NBA DFS. But yeah, we'll be back as we get the updated lineup information, and then we'll go from there. All right, so we just got the confirmed starters, the confirmed injuries, all of that. And what's changed? What's new, Matt?
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird slate with just the one early game, but basically the main news is that Dennis Schroeder was ruled out. So you can see right here my entries. So I went back to my entries tab here. These are my exposures that I have in play right now. And you can see Dennis Schroeder is listed out. So generally what I like to do, and what I recommend for people using this tool, is when there's a player that's ruled out, I like to just first thing use our quick swap tool to just get them out of your lineups. So that doesn't rebuild all of your lineups. All it does is it'll replace Schroeder with the next best projected player. So I'm going to do that right now.
Yeah, this is kind of like global swap on steroids, where
Yep.
DraftKings, FanDuel, they each have a built-in tool that lets you global swap. It lets you swap out a player for another player, but it's very limiting. If you've ever used it, especially when it's coming down to the wire, it's a pain, and you're just not getting that good of results. And so what we do with Quick Swap is we'll say, all right, just take everyone that's out and replace them with the best available, or you can get more specific if you want. But what we'll do is go through each of those lineups and find the best available player in his place, but not just by using his salary, but by using the entire available salary cap for each lineup. So that's how you can see over here on the right who we were able to swap him out for in different spots.
Yep. So so he was removed from these lineups, then he was replaced, but you can see who he was replaced by over here. So I'm just going to first go to DraftKings, and I'm going to just upload that new file. And then I'm going to go back here, and it actually looks like I'm looking at our Slack channel right now, and a sim just started for the Heat Kings game. So it looks like we are re-simulating the game based on the starters. I think this is because Bielitsa, I think that's how you pronounce his name, is starting, which we weren't expecting. So
yeah, so what we'll do is we'll just give a few minutes for that to finish, just to make sure we have the latest information in there. And that's really why it's so important to do that quick swap right away. You want to just make sure your bases are covered in that you at least don't have anyone out. And then you're going to get the latest projections in and rebuild those lineups with the time you have remaining. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier with getting your dummy lineups out of there as soon as you can. It's like the first thing you want to do is just limit your downside, make the quick change, and then we'll just wait a minute or two for this to finish, and Matt will show what the actual rebuild process looks like.
Cool. So yeah, the Sims just finished for actually both of these late games. So what I'm going to do first is refresh the projections. This should happen automatically. If you're in another tab or you open up the page, it'll refresh. But if you're just sitting on this entries tab, it's better to be safe and refresh the projections. So I believe Bielitsa went up a lot. I don't remember what his projection was before, but this looks a lot higher. So I'm going to now just run my late swap. So you can see I don't have Schroeder in the lineups anymore, so I at least don't have the out player, but I still want to re-optimize these lineups based on based on the starters that came out, and with Schroeder out, we're going to have some players are going to get bumped up. So I'm going to use late swap, and it saves the settings that I had before. So I'm just going to use these same settings on a bigger slate. I might tweak them, but since it's just 2 games, 2 of the 3 games are still left, I'm just going to stick with my same settings, which is pretty high ownership fade and really high smart diversity. Since it's such a small slate, I just hit late swap here. And once this finishes, then I can just download my lineups straight from here. So you
What's
can
actually
see
happening
where,
behind the scenes?
yeah, so what we're doing behind the scenes is we're actually sending all of those lineups to our builder, and the builder just goes through each of them one by one, and essentially, rebuilds them, locking in the players that are already, whose games have already started. So, for example, for this lineup, it has Chris Middleton and OG, and so those players would be locked in, but then the rest of the players could change. And so actually, if you hover over it, you can see what the original lineup was here. So you can see it's actually fairly different than
Yeah.
originally. And actually, almost every single one of my lineups changed. So that just shows you how kind of important late swap is. It's that, obviously 2/3 of the game had not started, but still, it really changed the composition of all of my lineups. So once I'm done with this, which there's really nothing to do here, I'm just kind of checking out my exposures. If I wanted to, I could go back and set some exposure changes. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to download my lineups, and I'll just open Draftkings while I'm at it. And I just click Upload CSV, and I upload my CSV file. And now my lineups are updated, and I'm done. So, it was really, a matter of seconds to run that late swap, super easy. And I do have time if I wanted to make some changes to these lineups.
Could you go
I
back to the
could.
entries tab just to show so on
Yeah.
this one, this is where you could edit the exposures before you hit the late swap. You can tell us what min and max exposure you want us to shoot for when we're
Yeah.
rebuilding it. Because we're not building an entire lineup pool for you, you're not able to adjust those on the fly. So if you do have specifics that you want, you can put them in here, hit the rebuild.
Yep.
And we can't guarantee we'll get it exactly because some players are going to be locked in. There's going to be salary restrictions and all of that. But the lineup builder will do its best to get close to that.
Yeah. And like I can even show an example because now looking at these, I have Iguodala at 31%. He's a, we have his projection as decently high for, especially for a 3,000 player, but he's a pretty low usage player, which kind of caps his upside a little bit. So, if I don't know if I want 31% or 32%, so I could cap his exposure at say I do 18% here, and I can run a late swap again. And it's not a guarantee that we're going to get him down, especially because he's so low in salary. There might not be swaps for all of the lineups that he's in, but let's see what we get here. Yeah, so we almost got him down to 18%. End up being 19%. Probably there was just a few lineups that it was hard to swap him out of, but we get him a lot lower than before. So it's pretty easy to just set those exposures in late swap, and then I can download my lineups again, upload them to DraftKings. Again, it's very easy to do that process.
Yeah, and I mean, now that we've got this done, there's just a few things I want to touch on quickly, and it's just how this impacts your strategy. Because for building lineups from the very beginning, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but to me, there's kind of two buckets where it's like, all right, I haven't messed around with late swap much. I'm pretty much a beginner at NBA DFS anyway. So like for me, I could see just saying, okay, I'm still getting down my NBA DFS process. I'm going to rely on late swap just when there's major news. Like in this case, I probably would have gone in and done it and rebuilt my lineups, but I wouldn't have adjusted my actual build process around it. But I know you've dug into this a ton and have really shaped your actual initial build process around the late swap tool. So can you talk a little bit about kind of some of those advanced strategies and just how you're thinking about the entire process now that we do have such a powerful late swap tool in there?
Yeah, so one thing, so there's definitely some more advanced, strategies like you mentioned. So one thing is, especially on a small slate like this, if there's a lot of questionable players in the later games, you can actually get some edge by, in the initial build, maybe bumping down some of those early game players and actually bumping up the questionable players, because when a player is questionable, they end up usually having lower ownership than normal. And so because you can late swap, it's not a big deal. If they get ruled out, then, you just can swap them using this tool. Uh, in the actual late swap settings, it can kind of, you might want to use some different settings as the slate progresses, especially on a bigger slate. If you get to the last game of the night and there's this big news, there's a new player that's starting, you might not want as much ownership fade or as much smart diversity in your lineups, because there's so much edge just from being, overexposed to a certain player that it's going to be low owned. So I will often, when I'm running late swap, I'll maybe lower the smart diversity a lot, because I just want to make sure that I don't want to have that much diversity in terms of these plays, because I want to really take advantage of that leverage. So,
Right.
That's one strategy I'll use as well.
And when you're playing NBA, are you planning to run new builds like late swap for every kind of new set of games starting, or only when there is like major changes, or does it depend?
Honestly, I usually will run late swap after, before almost every set of games. It can depend. I mean, if there's really not much news at all, I might not. If there aren't any sims that run, projections don't change, I don't need to run late swap, obviously. But if sims run, even if it's just minor changes, I like to just, I think every opportunity you can get to, run your build with new projections is going to give you a bit of edge over the field. Especially, I think, when there's a major player that gets ruled out, more people are going to late swap. But if it's just, a player is starting that's unexpected, or, maybe there's some sort of minutes restriction, something like that, you can definitely get a lot of edge, because people are lazy, or they just don't see that kind of news and they don't make those updates. And so I very often will run late swap, you know, throughout the night, as each upcoming set of games, um, comes up. So I'll usually, 10 minutes before those games start, I'll run my late swap, and I'll just keep doing that throughout the night. And so my exposures at the end of the night end up being a lot different than at the beginning, but I think I'm really taking advantage of that edge.
Right. And I think, yeah, it all comes down to what you as a player are looking for. If you are just getting your feet wet, I think you can keep your basic strategy the same and invest in building out that strong foundation of initial lineups right out of the gate. And when there's major news, know that you have the tools available to quickly pivot, not just off of injured players, but also to take advantage of how that impacts everyone else in the game. But
Yeah.
if you know you're going to have some more time available and really are trying to get every edge that you can in a contest, there's a lot of merit to just saying, all right, like for my first build, I'm going to focus on this first game, and maybe I'm going to lower exposures there if the circumstances make that seem like a great opportunity in the later games. But you know that things are going to change a ton, and you're going to be available to capitalize on those changes. But there's no right or wrong way to do this, and I think we've shown just how powerful this tool is, how much further it goes than the traditional global swap tools. And really, when you combine the late swap with the entry editor, how easy the entire thing is. You're not messing with CSVs and praying that you don't make a mistake minutes away from lock or minutes before tip off, whatever it may be. You know that you can get those quick changes in, whether it's to the dummy lineups when you're first submitting your entries, to the quick swap when there's a late scratch, all the way to actually putting in the final build. We've got you covered. And if you like what you've seen and want to try it out for yourself, you can take advantage of this and try it for free as part of our 3-day trial, which you can find over at SaberSim.com. We are always happy to answer any questions you may have. So please let us know what you think. Please let us know if there are any topics that you want us to cover around this. We're really excited to get this out there and see what you guys can do with that. But again, thanks for tuning in and good luck.
Yeah, thanks everyone.